Ew. What am I talking about today? I underestimated my Oshi's attachment. Um, if you haven't watched any of these videos before, the general idea is I'm gonna give you a rating off the bat and then go into why I gave you that rating. If you don't care, then screw you. Okay, general rating, I'm gonna give it an 8. I enjoyed it. I don't know. I feel like there's a weird genre of isekais because yes, it's an isekai. Yes, I always talk about isekais. Yes, I know. But there's a weird genre of isekais where there's like these contractual like marriage things, and I feel like this is the best one out of all of them, or at least one of the best ones. I don't know. I really enjoy it. Um, and yes, throughout the video I'll explain why. Whatever, watch the video if you want to know. Jesus Christ, I mean, God. I'm sure you have time if you're already looking at weird videos like this. So, general gist. This girl is reincarnated. She had like a hard life before, worked her to the bone, her family didn't care about her, blah blah blah. Gets reincarnated, gets worked to the bone again, and eventually realizes, like, when she remembers her past life, she kind of realizes, like, oh, I'm a character that's gonna die. Like, I have, like, an illness or whatever. So, in, 3 months or whatever, I'm dead. So, if I'm in, this world, I might as well see my, like, my favorite guy, right? This. Oshi. So she goes off and tries to find him. What's the gist with him? Well, he's like a... Not really like... I mean, it's kind of like a noble, but basically how it works is like there's like a central magician state, and whoever the most powerful magician is, rules it. And of course, it's an isekai, so the main characters are always going to be OP. So he's, the head of it. And the idea of the state is kind of like, if you have money, you can like contract any magician to do whatever. So she basically goes and says like, hey, my contract is basically just like, let me hang out with you for like 3 months. And she straight up tells him like, I'm just a fan, things like that, and I just want to leave after 3 months, but I want to stay here for that time. She doesn't, however, tell him that she's gonna die. She kind of neglects that point. And the general idea is slowly he grows attached to her. And wants to keep her around and everything. It's one of those things. So there's like a contract marriage situation because he wanted her to, like, I don't know, be protected, I guess, because like if you're not a magician and you live there, you could be in danger. So the idea was he gets protected, like he protects her by her being like a, basically his fiancée, right? I don't know, it's not like a super unique idea or anything, but I feel like how it's done is actually pretty good. I don't know, I weirdly enjoyed it. I don't know, it was pretty, I don't know, it was just like a satisfying, solid story. I think like the first part is the first part's a little more generic, like, all of his subordinates don't like that she's around, so they like, they'll bully her by like sicking creatures on her to like scare her and get her to leave, It's a pretty generic idea, like I've seen that in a million other stories, but I think it gets better. I Actually, you know what? I'll talk about this later. I want to get the generic part out first. Generic part, there's characters that bully her. There's a whole bunch of them. And they get punished and things like that, yes. But at the start, anyway, it's not very extreme. So it's kind of just like, yeah, they get punished, but it's... who cares? Like, it's nothing crazy. And at the start, there's a lot of generic parts, like, her family, they basically don't care about her, and then when she goes away, they start to think to themselves, like, oh man, we kind of needed her and things like that, but then they're, like, mad at her for leaving. But at the same time, she kind of neglected to tell them, like, oh, I'm dead, like, I'm gonna die in 3 months, and then leave, right? Like, if she said, hey, I'm dead in 3 months, then, maybe things would be a little different. like the general idea of the original story that she's being brought into was that she died and that changed her sister's outlook. But in this case, she didn't die, so her sister's still bad, even though she's meant to be the heroine in the original story. But I feel like a lot of the problems that come about, like, they're kind of because of her, you know? Like, she's kind of, you know, not telling people about certain things, and that's causing issues. I don't know. But those are, like, the more generic things. Some, like, things that stand out to me a little bit, like, some of his subordinates, especially this guy, like, they feign like they're helping him, but then they'll just, like, splurt stuff out. Like, he basically says that they're married right off the bat. This guy's, like, always teasing him and things like that. I mean, it's very, like, I don't know. I think the subordinates are actually kind of fun, where they're not just, like, lackeys. Like, they seem to have a lot more personality than a lot of other ones. Also, I mentioned the whole, like, oh, you know, the subordinates bully her, then they get punished, blah, blah, blah thing. This one, and listen, it's not like a super big part, so if you... I don't think it's that big of a deal if I spoil this, but if you don't want to hear anything, maybe skip ahead like a minute or whatever. But, like, she's like the villainess type, right? And you would think, like, oh, she, you know, gets a slap on the back and then continues doing dicky things, blah, 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 continues the problems, and it just never ends, right? And they never deal with it. They straight up axe her off. They're just like, you're dead. And I'm like, whoa, I did not expect that. They're just like, no, you're gone. You're done. And it's like, Jesus, like, okay. Like, I feel like that's real different for a lot of these stories. Like, a lot of the times you just, like, you wonder, like, oh, there's this villain. And you think to yourself, like, just get rid of them. Like, why are you not getting rid of this villain? And they just, you know, they'll just do little, they'll beat them up and then they'll come back and do something else. And it's like, why don't you just get rid of them? This one, they're like, no, she's dead. She's gone. Which is, I mean, that's different, all right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like it's a relatively fun story, just kind of like seeing that sense of attachment growing with this guy, and she like can't really comprehend that her, you know, favorite character likes her. So she's like, no, I'm gonna leave in 3 months. And she keeps telling him, like, no, I'm gone. Like, as soon as that 3 months, those 3 months are up, I'm gone. You know, as soon as those are up, gone. And it's kind of funny, like, seeing him constantly react, like, how can I make her stay? How can I do this? How can I do that? And then, of course, there's that, you know, that element of, like, she's sick and he doesn't know about it. Now, I will say, it's a little annoying, right? Because this guy says, like, I will, like, do whatever you want. There's a point where he is so devoted. And she has an illness, right? And I think to myself, like, if there is a single person that can cure your illness, who do you think that would be? I would think it would be, like, the best mage around? So why not ask him about it and tell him about your illness, and then maybe you'd get cured? I don't know. It seems a little obvious to me, but hey, whatever. And then, like, she, like, constantly just hides it. And I'm like, why wouldn't you just tell him? And then, like, she tries to research it on her own and things like that. I'm like, just tell him. Like, there's nothing to lose. If she just said, like, hey, I'm gonna die in 3 months, and that's why I said 3 months, he would be like, oh, alright, we need to figure this out. And also, like, there's a point where, like, his magic is shown to, like, help her a little bit. So I'm like, clearly there's potential. There is potential for him to do something. I don't know. It's a little silly to me. I feel like that's a kind of big plot point that is, you know, it comes up a lot, but it's not really, like, addressed logically, and a lot of other things are, so it's kind of annoying. And I think the reason for that is probably because they want to make this story like a, you know, a long, like, they want to make it like a long story, right? Like, a lot of the problems that you see with these kinds of stories is, like, the author wants to make it super long, right? Like, they want, you know, like a One Piece, right? When in reality, your story would probably be a better overall product if, like, instead of going for 300 chapters, right? Like, you don't need 300 chapters. Like, jump that down to, like, I don't know, like 100 maybe? And I feel like your story would be 20 times better. Because they just extend plot points, they don't get to the point. Like, they just lower that chapter thing down a little bit, and I feel like so many stories like this would be so much better. Like, the reason, like, something like One Piece or something like that is so long is because it's not just, like, the main characters, right? Like, there's a world to this. But in a story like this, you're focusing on this guy and this girl, and those are the main points. There's not really a lot of other, like, there's not a ton of story beats going on outside of, like, their problems, what's going on with them, right? And that's when I think you need to know, like, 100 chapters is going to get you a lot further than 300 chapters. I don't know. That's just my belief, but hey, whatever. You know, I'm not your mom. So what should I end this with? I'll do the old SAE. Now you might ask, what is the SAE? Well, it's story, art, and enjoyment. Story-wise, I like some of the unique elements, but there are some major plot points that I dislike. So I'm gonna go with a 7. I think that's kind of the balance, right? Like, between the good, really unique elements and the really annoying plot holes. Art-wise, no, it's pretty good art. I can't lie, like, it's pretty solid for one of these kinds of stories. And I haven't seen the magic go crazy yet. A lot of the problems with these stories is when the magic goes crazy and you see, like, a million particle effects all over the screen and all that stuff, which is kind of annoying. I don't really enjoy that. So I think, like, an 8 is probably a reasonable bet. And then enjoyment, I'm kind of stuck between an 8 and a 9. I think it's really fun. It really is. But then, like, but then those plot holes, like, dig into me once in a while, and I'm like, stop it. But yeah, I think all that goes to be roughly an 8. I think that's, like, my general. I think that's a fair rating. I would recommend it. It's a good story. Yeah. I mean, I think that's really all I have to say about this. I'd appreciate if you could like, comment, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. You know, leave another story you want me to read down below. Even if I read it, I'll read it again. I don't care. I have time. Yeah, I mean, I'll see ya.